What happens when an idea stops wandering and decides to settle down? Welcome to another story in the Brief Universal History of Civilizations series. Today I'll tell you about an age when meaning no longer runs away from the world, but starts organizing it from the inside. This is the moment when ideas step out of forests, debates, and personal awakenings and begin to settle into streets, homes, offices, and rules. From about 500 BCE onward, the Indian world no longer treats wisdom as a private escape from society. Instead, it turns insight into structure. Karma, duty, restraint, and compassion become things that can be taught, repeated, managed, and enforced. What was once rebellion against ritual slowly becomes ritual itself. Philosophy learns how to live with power. This is not an age of conquest in the usual sense. It is an age of internal alignment. The question is no longer how to leave the world behind, but how to stay in it without tearing it apart. Ethics moves closer to politics. Religion learns administration. Social order begins to look moral, not just inherited. From about 500 BCE to 500 CE, India experiments with something rare and dangerous: the attempt to freeze harmony into daily life. You see, this episode is not about belief versus disbelief. It is about what happens when meaning becomes stable enough to rule. And stability, as always, comes at a price. Stone dust gathers in thin lines as the broom moves steadily across the courtyard. Ananda works in silence, back straight, breath measured. Beyond the gate, the city is already awake. Carts rattle past. Merchants argue over weight and price. Coins clink. This is no forest refuge. The world presses close and loud, unavoidable. This is what happens after the prophets, when Dharma finally steps into history instead of standing outside it. The monastery holds its ground inside the noise. Walls soften sound, but not movement. Donors arrive daily with food, cloth, and questions. Kings send messengers. Traders bring news from distant markets. Dharma no longer hides from power. It learns how to stand next to it. Discipline replaces wandering. Teaching replaces provocation. Ananda has heard the older stories of men who leave home, reject ritual, refuse authority. That fire still warms the words he memorizes, but its shape has changed. Rules now govern meals, speech, and study. Senior monks assign tasks. Records are kept. Rebellion turns into routine, not in spirit, but in form. You see, what begins as refusal slowly becomes a way of staying. The city makes this unavoidable. The Ganges basin swells with people. Trade routes settle into reliable paths. Wealth moves in predictable patterns. Kings search for order that does not collapse into violence. Shamanic paths offer ethics without bloodline, restraint without chaos. Patronage follows usefulness. Ananda understands the compromise without naming it. Dharma does not rule. It advises. It legitimizes. It disciplines individuals who will return to markets, courts, and households. The forest teaches renunciation. The city demands coexistence. From a wider view, between about 500 and 300 BCE, Shamanic movements stop shouting from the margins and start building forms that last. As urban life expands and royal support steadies trade and governance, monastic communities anchor ethics inside cities rather than beyond them. Dharma enters history not as revolt, but as structure. As the courtyard clears, Ananda rests the broom against the wall. The bell will ring soon. The city keeps moving. Dharma remains, no longer wandering, no longer defiant, but steady inside the noise. Voices fade as the official clears his throat and the crowd settles. The stone stands warm from the sun, its letters cut deep enough to resist forgetting. Varsha reads slowly, careful not to stumble. Compassion, restraint, care for subjects, respect for life. The villagers listen in silence, unsure how to receive words that sound like advice, but arrive with authority. This is the Mauryan moment, when ethics stops being private and turns into a tool of rule. This is power testing something new. The message does not threaten, it instructs. Roads carry the messenger, officials carry the order. The state speaks here not through fear or tax, but through moral language. Varsha feels the difference at once. He has enforced levies before, he has organized labor. This weighs more. It asks not only what people must do, but how power itself should behave. The Mauryan machine reaches far. Provinces answer to a center that counts, records, inspects. Infrastructure holds it together. Posts change horses. Edicts repeat the same message across distances no earlier king could control. Rule must limit itself. Violence must be restrained. Authority must explain its actions. Villagers exchange glances. Some nod, others doubt. Morality announced from above feels strange, almost intrusive. Yet it changes expectations. Officials are watched more closely. Punishment must justify itself. Governance gains something new, a conscience that can be quoted back at those who rule. Varsha senses the danger immediately. Ethics can legitimize power. It can also expose it. Once spoken publicly, it cannot be ignored without cost. The empire ties its own hands. Strength alone is no longer enough. Behavior now matters. From a wider view, between about 321 and 185 BCE, the Mauryan state runs a bold experiment. With centralized administration, roads, and public edicts, moral instruction becomes imperial policy. For the first time, a state is expected not only to rule effectively, but to rule rightly. Varsha finishes reading and steps back. The stone remains. The words will travel farther than he ever will. Power has learned to speak in moral terms, and the empire will be judged by them long after his voice falls silent. Smoke rises gently from the altar as ghee meets flame. Suresha watches the rhythm closely, correcting a chant before it slips. Children stand still. Elders nod. No banners hang above the courtyard. No imperial seal waits to approve the rite. The ceremony proceeds anyway, as it always has. This is what fragmentation looks like without collapse. The emperor is gone, but the world has not ended. Taxes are lighter, authority is closer. Kings now rule regions, not continents. Markets still open, marriages are arranged, fields are sown on time. Suresha feels no absence where panic should be. Order has changed scale, not disappeared. Ritual absorbs the shock. Caste fixes expectation. Local Dharma answers questions the empire once handled from afar. Who gives, who receives, who teaches, who obeys. life stabilizes through repetition rather than command. Pluralism replaces unity without announcing itself as a solution. It simply works. Suresha has heard stories of past greatness, Ashoka's roads, his edicts, his reach. They sound distant, impressive, and unnecessary. The household does not need an emperor to explain how to honor gods or ancestors. Meaning now lives at arm's length, manageable and familiar. The economy fragments along with power. Trade continues along older routes. Crafts localize. Wealth circulates inside regions instead of flowing upward. Authority negotiates rather than imposes. Brahmanic structures expand quietly, weaving Vedic ritual into everyday governance without erasing older practices. This is synthesis, not conquest. From a wider view, between about 185 BCE and 100 CE, the fall of Mauryan central power creates a vacuum without producing chaos. India regionalizes. Political authority fragments, but social order endures through ritual, caste, and local law. Unity dissolves into plurality without collapse. As the ceremony ends, Suresha distributes the offerings and dismisses the gathering. Life resumes its ordinary shape. Empires rise and fall. Households persist. India does not need to be one to endure. After empire, it learns how to be many and to remain whole inside that multiplicity. Dust settles as the caravan stops, animals groaning with relief. Kanishka unwraps the bundles slowly, careful with the cloth. The statue emerges into lamplight, calm and unfamiliar. The face is serene. The drapery falls in folds learned elsewhere. Greek softness, Indian stillness, something Central Asian in the stance. It belongs everywhere and nowhere at once. This is the moment when India opens to the world, when the Kushan bridge quietly does its work. Merchants gather without speaking. They recognize value immediately, not only in silver, but in meaning. This image can travel. It does not demand lineage, caste, or place. It carries a story that survives translation. Kanishka knows why it sells. Buddhism has learned how to move. The road has changed India. Central Asian corridors now link the Ganges to Persia, the steppe, and the Mediterranean. Ideas travel with spices and silk, carried by people who belong fully to no single world. The Kushan realm does not block this movement. It profits from it, protects it, and shapes it. Empire here connects rather than encloses. Kanishka has seen monasteries rise beside markets, stupas near customs posts. Monks bless caravans, merchants fund temples. Ethics and exchange learn to cooperate. Buddhism adapts without dissolving, shedding local limits, accepting new forms. Dharma becomes legible to foreigners, portable without becoming thin. This is no longer only an Indian story. Images shift, texts translate, practices adjust. What spreads is not a state, but a civilization that can be carried, taught, and adopted without conquest. India opens outward, not by force, but by compatibility. As the statue is wrapped again and loaded for the next stage, Kanishka studies the road ahead. The world has grown larger. India now moves within it, not as a center demanding obedience, but as a source of meaning that survives the journey. The courtyard is quiet, except for voices moving in perfect unison. Shamadeva stands before the children, listening more than watching. Their tongues shape the verses without strain. Sanskrit flows cleanly and precise. Sound, meaning, and order align as if they were always meant to. This is the moment when Dharma stops being debated and starts becoming the shape of society itself. These children are not learning facts, they are learning position. Language teaches hierarchy before anyone needs to explain it. Cosmology makes roles feel inevitable. Ritual confirms them day after day. Dharma is no longer argued or discovered. It is lived. Outside the school walls, the world feels steady. Fields produce reliably. Taxes arrive on time. Kings rule without constant war. Long stability allows patterns to harden. What once required persuasion now feels natural. Shamadeva senses the change without analyzing it. Teaching is no longer about forming minds. It is about maintaining an order that already holds. This is the Gupta synthesis taking shape. Vedic tradition, Brahmanic authority, regional custom, and political power fuse into a single fabric. Caste organizes daily expectation. Sanskrit binds elite culture across distance. Ritual anchors time itself. Dharma explains why each person belongs exactly where they are. There is little rebellion here and little reason for it. Order does not arrive with force. It settles quietly. Political power no longer needs to justify itself every day because social structure carries much of the burden. Kings protect Dharma. Brahmins define it. Households reproduce it. From a wider view, between about 320 and 450 CE, long-term stability and consolidated agrarian taxation allow this system to mature fully. Ethics, hierarchy, language, and ritual stop competing. They reinforce one another. Dharma becomes not just belief, but social architecture. Shamadev corrects a final syllable and nods. The lesson ends. The order it teaches does not. Drums roll past in measured rhythm as the procession moves down the street. Cloth gleams, voices chant. Priests walk first, then officials, then those whose presence confirms the order of things. At the edge, Ramu stands still, hands rough with work, eyes lowered by habit rather than command. No one blocks his way, no one needs to. Everyone knows their place, including him. This is the cost of harmony, when balance becomes so complete that society begins to stiffen. Ritual aligns time. Caste aligns duty. The city moves without friction because nothing is allowed to move very far. Ramu's craft sustains the order, but it does not lift him within it. His son will learn the same work. His daughter will marry where she is told. Stability reproduces itself quietly and efficiently. Once, monks walked these streets, questioning hierarchy, offering paths that ignored birth and station. Their presence thins now. Patronage follows permanence. Buddhism loses ground not through repression, but through irrelevance. In a world that feels complete, escape seems unnecessary. Innovation feels like disturbance. Population presses harder on land and labor. Opportunity narrows. Mobility turns into risk. The system responds by tightening boundaries, not loosening them. Dharma still speaks of duty and righteousness, but more and more as justification rather than inquiry. What began as synthesis slowly turns into enclosure. Ramu watches the last banners disappear. The street empties. Work resumes. Peace holds, firm and unquestioned. So does confinement. From a wider view, in the 4th and 5th centuries CE, the very mechanisms that stabilize Gupta society begin to freeze it in place. Demographic pressure and declining mobility harden what was once flexible. Creativity slows, alternative paths fade. Harmony demands its price. Ramu bends back to his tools. The order endures. His silence endures with it. The messenger arrives breathless, dust caked into his hair and beard. Reports spill out unevenly. Villages burned, tax convoys broken, riders appearing where no one expects them. Mihirakula listens without interrupting, fingers tightening on the arm of his seat. The old assurances no longer sound convincing, even to him. This is how unity begins to fail, not with conquest, but with the loss of confidence. This is the moment when the moral glue of the Gupta world starts to crack. No capitals fall, no temples are destroyed to make a spectacle. The white Huns strike the seams instead. Revenue falters. Protection fails locally before it fails everywhere. The system depends on balance, and balance depends on the belief that tomorrow will resemble yesterday. That belief dissolves first. Gupta unity had been moral before it was political. Kings ruled as guardians of Dharma, not merely as wielders of force. When protection weakens, legitimacy thins quickly. Local rulers begin to hoard resources. Officials negotiate in private. Ritual continues, but without confidence. The shared horizon fractures into regions managing survival on their own terms. Mihirakula grasps the danger too late. The Huns cannot rule India, but they do not need to. By disrupting trade, taxation, and security, they undo the conditions that once made unity feel natural. Order stops reproducing itself. It must now be enforced, and enforcement reveals its cost. From a wider view, around 450 to 500 CE, steppe migrations destabilize the fiscal and political foundations of Gupta power. The White Huns do not shatter cities, they shatter equilibrium. The Dharmic synthesis breaks into regional worlds, each claiming continuity, none able to restore the whole. As night falls, Mihirakula dismisses the council. Fires burn in the distance. India remains. The idea of one India does not. Unity collapses morally before it collapses administratively, leaving a civilization that endures, but never again in quite the same shared form. What this age leaves behind is not ruins, but a pattern. India does not fall when its empires fade. It reorganizes meaning instead. Dharma survives conquest, fragmentation, even failure, because it was never only a tool of power. It was a way of arranging life so that it could continue. What is gained is endurance. A civilization that learns how to function without unity, without constant command, without a single center that must be obeyed to survive. What is lost is openness. Harmony, once stabilized, hardens. Social order becomes shelter, but also a ceiling. Paths narrow. Questions grow quieter. The classical age reveals an uncomfortable truth. Ideas strong enough to hold a society together are also strong enough to hold it still. Stability preserves meaning, but it also decides who may move, who must stay, and who will never be asked what they might become. This episode's thought is simple. A civilization does not end when it loses power. It changes when it decides what is no longer worth questioning. In the next story, we move west, to a different answer to the same problem. Persia will attempt something radical, an empire built not only on force, but on moral rule. Order will be justified not by harmony, but by righteousness.